Namaste, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Pranav Patel, and I'll be your host for tonight's webinar. Again, tonight's event is brought to you by Hindu YUVA, the largest Hindu organization on campuses across North America, with over 100 university chapters and 35 high school chapters nationwide. Hindu Yuva, which stands for Youth for Unity, Virtues, and Action, is built around the four P's: practice, promote, preserve, and protect, helping young Hindus deepen their understanding of Dharma and carry it forward with confidence in their everyday lives. Through things like regular GBMs or community meetings, community events, and seva or selfless service, Hindu Yuva chapters give back to the communities they're a part of, while building a strong sense of purpose and belonging among their members. Tonight marks the third of our four-part webinar series called Dharma in America, held in honor of America's 250th anniversary. Over the course of this summer, we're exploring four dimensions of Dharma: personal, family, community, and national, through conversations with well-known public figures about how they've navigated their own Dharma while building their lives here in America. Tonight's session explores national dharma, the responsibility we hold as citizens to contribute meaningfully to the broader society and nation we're a part of. For Hindu Americans, this invites reflection on how our values shape civic engagement, leadership, and our role in an evolving national landscape. Now, in a time of rapid social, political, and cultural change, many are grappling with what it means to serve something larger than themselves while staying rooted in their identity. Tonight's conversation will examine how our guest interprets his duty to the nation, balancing cultural heritage with national belonging. Our goal tonight is to make national dharma more tangible, moving from passive participation to active contribution in civic life. And we have an incredible guest to help us do just that. Joining us tonight is Kapil Sharma. Kapil ji serves as senior lead at the Global India Collective, where he helps align diaspora leadership with US-India priorities and drive long-term impact towards India's 2047 vision. He previously founded Capstone Strategies and served as a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. With over 30 years of experience in law, public policy, and corporate philanthropy, Kapilji has advised C-suite executives on philanthropic giving and represented industry groups on international trade and economic growth policy. We're very excited to hear his story tonight. And guiding tonight's conversation is our moderator, Shrikar. Shrikar is originally from Westchester, Pennsylvania, and has earned his Bachelor's of Science in Statistics and Machine Learning from Carnegie Mellon University, and he currently works as a quant at Goldman Sachs. During his time at CMU, he served as president of the Hindu Yuva chapter, and he currently serves as the Northeast Regional Hindu Yuva coordinator. With that, I'm happy to hand it off to Shrikar to get us started.
Thank you, Pranav, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Kapilji, it's an honor to have you with us. You spent more than 3 decades working across government affairs, business, public policy, and the US-India relationship. Tonight, we hope to explore what Dharma means at the level of citizenship, such as what we owe to our country, how we participate in its institutions, and also how Hindu Americans can contribute to America's future. So to begin, let's get started just by getting a better understanding of your background. You studied political science and law before beginning a career in government and public affairs. What initially drew you towards this work?
First, I want to thank all of you for inviting me to come in and join you and to talk about my background, to talk about what Dharma means to me at the national level and just politics in general. And I would prefer to chat with you than my clients or people that I normally work with because I feel like we'll have a much more productive conversation. So thank you. Um, I started working in politics while I was in college, and actually didn't start until after college. Early on, I'm a product of New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey, Jersey Shore, and went to Rutgers undergraduate. Now, both of you kindly, with the kind introductions, noted that I've been working for 30 years. So 3 decades. So that means I went to college in the early 90s. And I was probably raised in a very interesting way. My father is from Jalandhar, my mom is from Delhi. They came to the US in 1972. But they faced a lot of racism when they came, and their way of trying to deal with that was that I wouldn't face it. So they wanted me to integrate very much so into the mainstream American community, which meant that while we tangentially touched upon my Indian culture, they wanted me to get integrated fully. So when I got to Rutgers, I wanted to learn more about Indian culture, Indian history, who I was, my identity. Because a lot of us were first generation Indian Americans in college at that time, and we were really trying to figure out what does it mean to be Indian American. Rutgers, surprisingly, and those of you who know Rutgers and the Indian population there, decided to cut all of its India and Hindu related courses. And for me, it was so important to take those courses that I took the university on and rallied the students, and we got funding back in 92 to get those courses back at Rutgers. That led me to meeting Indian leaders because they heard about the work I was doing, and that ultimately led me to Congressman Frank Pallone, which Congressman Pallone and I then started the India Caucus in 1993. And that's when my life more or less changed.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you mentioned that your parents were initially trying to foster like you to, I guess, integrate more into American culture. But despite that, what drew you to want to challenge the university when they made those like changes to the coursework, or like what inspired you to want to pursue that challenge on?
Yeah, so I grew up actually in a part of New Jersey which didn't have too many Indians. So believe it or not, there are parts of New Jersey, like on the Jersey Shore, where there's only one or two Indian families. So for me, I didn't grow up around many Indians. I did grow up around with Preet Bharara, so that's kind of funny. If anybody knows who Preet Bharara was, he was a famous official in the Obama administration. Um, when I got to Rutgers, I started meeting a lot of Indian Americans, some from Edison, New Jersey, some from different Cherry Hill, where there were large populations. They were extremely cultural. They were very much immersed, and I was not. And so I wanted to talk to people. I know they looked at me as a coconut or a potato, but that was not by choice. That was by circumstance. And so that's that I really wanted to identify and be part of my community. And I thought I wanted to first read and learn academically more about our background and then start to get involved. I don't know what happened, but I became president of the Indian Association there by within 2 years. And I created actually a civil rights organization for Indian Americans at Rutgers. Because I think because I was so aggressive in trying to learn more about our culture, I started hitting roadblocks with the administration and with the processes. And people saw that I kept challenging Rutgers University and the administration. And so I started getting backing and a following of other students and started finally understanding what collective power meant. That as one person, I can't change university rules. But if I can get 200 to 300 Indian American students together, then the university starts to listen.
That's super cool how you had sort of this drive to like learn more about Indian culture, and that pushed you and motivated you to do so much. Bouncing off the idea of collective power, you also mentioned earlier you worked under Senator Robert Torricelli and Congressman Frank Pallone. I guess taking what you learned from Rutgers and then later on in your career working with them, what did you learn during your time on Capitol Hill, especially like specifically about public policy and how the government actually functions?
That's we could do another 3 or 4 series of webinars on what the government, what I learned working in government. And quite frankly, and I think probably you guys all know this, what the government doesn't know. Um, a couple of things, and remember, it was a sign of the times too, because I'm working on Capitol Hill. I'm 19 years old. We just started the India Caucus. Um, and the first glaring thing that I saw was that people's impression of Hindus, people's impressions of India, people's impressions of our diaspora came from the media. And it came from somebody who will pick up the newspaper, today will read a tweet or watch a meme or a podcast, and that's how they genuinely formed their opinion. And then what I quickly also learned was that nobody challenges that opinion. So I would walk around Capitol Hill and I would hear comments all the time, including one interesting comment where someone said to me, "Why do Indians hate women and babies, female babies?" And I said, "What?" I was like, where did this come from?" And I soon learned that 60 Minutes had did an episode about gender infanticide in India, female infanticide in India. And that one episode of 60 Minutes had such a widespread impact around Capitol Hill. That was actually the goal of the India Caucus. So the goal of the India Caucus, we created it, was to push back on people's assertions of how they perceived us and how they perceived India. So we wanted to make it very fact-based. So that was the first glaring thing is that they're not as data-driven as they may make it out to be. And so that was the first thing. The second thing is everybody in politics, everybody is willing to compromise. As long as you come with the right attitude and you speak to people in a professional way or in a respectful way, it is easy to get compromise. But one, I was just surprised about the lack of data, how easily influenced people were by media, and how willing people were to compromise.
Do you think that's gotten better over time in terms of compromise or how easily influenced people are? Or I guess have like the efforts worked to try and remediate that a bit better? Or is it still pretty sustained?
I think it's worse now than it's ever been. I don't think people listen to each other anymore. I don't think people want to talk to each other anymore. Um, I, I think now what I see and what I engage in is people just want to make their point and then they walk away. And that doesn't lead to anything productive. I also find that people are afraid to engage coming out of COVID. I find that people are worried about cancel culture. People are worried about how they're going to be perceived by friends, how they're going to be perceived as a whole. And we need to get away from that. We genuinely have to get away from that. We can't be shy or embarrassed of who we are, what we are. When I was growing up, there were people, students in my high school who would bring, my parents owned an Indian grocery store. So mom was a nurse, dad was a teacher, public high school teacher, and also owned an Indian grocery store in Eatontown, New Jersey, not in Edison. And so you're the only Indian store in a 50-mile radius of Edison. And I can assure you that people would make comments, kids would make fun of me, people would vandalize my parents' store. And so my dad being a Banju from Jalandhar, he just didn't take it. And he actually pushed back on it. Um, and wasn't embarrassed of who he was. I think that's where I got a lot of that. But I feel like today people are less likely to confront misopinions than they were when I was around, when I was younger.
I guess being, or just for the broader young American Hindu audience, what can they do to try and, I guess, step up or not allow for this culture? Like it's gotten worse, as you've mentioned, especially post COVID. But what steps can young Hindu Americans take to try and make it better? Where if they notice something maybe that they think is in there, or some comments that are not right, what can they do to try and, I guess, oppose that?
You know, it's a really hard question because you're on how many campuses did you say? 130 campuses around the country, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the experience of someone in Boston is going to be very different from the experience of someone in Mississippi versus Nebraska. And I think that you have to almost take it by a case by case basis. The first thing that I think I would do in your shoes as a group is I would try to make sure that you share stories. And so you have more forums like this, and that you dedicate those forums to learning from each other. That's what we did actually. So when we started seeing racism in New Jersey and around the country in the early 90s, the first thing we did was we all got together and said, "What are we hearing? What are we seeing?" And we collected the data. And then we said to ourselves, okay, what is it that we want to do? What's the consequence of such actions? And that's the key part, right? You have to work towards something. You just don't want to be angry for the sake of being angry, and you don't want to sit around in a room and just, for lack of a better term, and I'm sorry for the bitch at each other, because it doesn't do anything. So, for example, most recent example, Trump calls India a shithole country, correct? You remember that, I'm sure. What was the consequence to that? I mean, I went to a lot of dinner parties, people complained about it, but I actually can tell you, I got up and left many of those conversations because all people were doing was they were complaining, but they were not talking about action. What are we going to do with it? And I think that's the key for any group is you got to say, what do I want to achieve? What am I going to take this energy and make it productive? And so there are lots of things going on right now to the community that I would say, what are you doing about it? And that's the very first question to ask. Then you move, and then you can get people like me and others to come in and say, okay, look, based on our experience, if you want to change X, Y, Z, this is how you do it. So I'll give you a fun example. I shouldn't call it fun. I mean, like for political wonky people like me, I like challenges. So as you know, after 9/11, the first person arrested was a Sikh. The first person murdered after 9/11 was a Sikh. The first places of worship were gurdwaras, right? And I remember there were people making jokes about Indians and Sikhs on the radio. And they were making comments saying like, I don't know, I see a brown guy. How do I know this guy is not going to jump in a plane and crash it? And that had such big consequences to any young Indian person walking around, right? And so what I did was I would listen to the radio, and then I wrote down who was advertising on their radio stations. I then called the general manager of the radio station and I said, I'm going to be contacting all of these people who advertise on your station if I don't get a public apology from the hosts. Um, sure enough, 1 week later, apologies on the radio station started coming through. And you know where I learned that from, that technique from? Take a wild guess where I learned that technique from.
From, I guess, Capitol Hill, if it's a wild guess.
No, come on. I wouldn't
Oh, I
ask
guess
you
this was
this
might be before, or just from
from Mahatma Gandhi. So if you think about where was Mahatma Gandhi's greatest success, obviously it was the nonviolent movement. It was when the British started losing money, when they started boycotting British products, when they started doing they were starting to do things at home. That mindset was also then brought to South Africa, right? Where if you really want to get real change, you hurt people in their pocketbooks. The civil rights movement in the United States really became effective when the separate but equal clauses came into effect and white people couldn't make money anymore. And they were like thinking to themselves, well, I guess I can stop being racist if I can make a few bucks. If I'm going to lose money, then it's not worth being a racist. There's a consequence to the action. And Gandhi taught everybody that. That's how the nonviolent movement worked, was because the British didn't think it was worth the money, the loss of money, to keep doing what they're doing. So apply that. Anybody,
that's super interesting. And
yeah,
talking about,
if you find something going on somewhere, whether it's a business, a school, or an organization, just simply boycott it.
yeah, just a quick reminder, in the audience, whoever's watching, feel free to drop questions and we'll eventually, in a bit, answer those questions. But going back to the point about, I guess, Dharma, and sort of Dharma is understood as a responsibility arising from the role one occupies. And this series is centered around the concept of Dharma. So when you hear the phrase national Dharma, what does that phrase mean to you?
Well, national dharma, what it means to me is participation. It's your duty to make your country or where you're living better in any way, whether it's through philanthropy, whether it's through civic participation, whether it's through political participation. You have to be engaged. You cannot be a passive person. And so that's how I think about it. And there's so many different levels, right? You don't have to run for office in order to meet that. But you have to be engaged. You have to be proactively moving forward. And I think that's the key. So that's what that means to me.
And being, I guess, part on that engagement part, like I've noticed like the Indian American community has had a lot of success in medicine, technology, business, and education. But beyond their professional success, how do they keep engaged, or what responsibilities may the community have towards their country, or what civic responsibilities may they have? And I guess how can they keep engaged in that? Because no, I notice a lot of the time people are very career oriented, and you don't hear much about the civic responsibility or engagement. How can that be encouraged further?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a question I've been thinking about a lot recently, and something we've been dealing here at the Global India Collective. Um, Look, we always talk about how many CEOs there are. We talk about how many doctors there are. We talk about all of our great successes. Um, but have all of those individual successes, has it made us feel more comfortable in this country? Do we feel safer in this country? Do we feel respected in this country? Do we feel heard in this country? And the answer, at least for me, is no. And so it is one thing to have all of this individual success, and I get why it is so ingrained in our community. I think about, probably your grandparents or your parents, my parents, what did they leave to come to the US? What did they have to do in order to make it give me the opportunity to succeed in life and my kids? Um, it wasn't to engage in civic participation, it was to work, keep your head down, don't rock the boat. But now we are 150 years into the United States, right? Our community has been here for more than 150 years. Um, we are at 5 million people, and I still don't feel like we do enough collectively as a community to gain respect. Like I said, we have a lot of individual success, and sometimes I wonder if we put too much success in titles and money than we do in actually giving back to our larger community. Um, I'll give you a good example. I know you're from Pittsburgh, and you went to Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah, I'm originally, yeah.
Yeah, you went to Carnegie Mellon, so you're Pittsburgh area. And I was just there, and I was talking to both Jewish and Hindu leaders. And I asked the Jewish leaders, when they build a synagogue, what does community mean to them? And they talked about how the synagogue engages not only their own members, but the community as a whole, at large. So, how is a synagogue engaging every single person within, let's say, a 10 to 15 to 20 block of that community? When I asked Hindu leaders that of the temples, they looked inward, not outward. So they were talking more about how are they addressing the needs of Hindu Americans. And I said, well, shouldn't you also include non-Hindus? The 20 to 30 blocks, just like the Jewish community does. Shouldn't that be as equally important? Because that's what being a member of a community means. And so we have to start looking outward. We have to start learning how to engage people beyond our comfort zone. And we have to start educating people beyond ourselves. And I think that's part of Dharma that we need to also start engaging in. It's so important. We're too insular of a community, way too insular. Why, let me ask you this, Shikar. Why do you think why do you agree? Do you not agree? And
No, I actually I agree, and like that was a follow-up question I had. Like earlier, you mentioned so much professional and educational success, but that's not really turned into civic influence or even, as a matter of fact, giving back. But I guess why does success in one area not automatically translate into influence in another? So why is it that while we see Indian Americans are one of the highest earning communities and they have so much success in so many various industries, why has that not translated into wanting to be influential, maybe in a civic sense, or maybe, yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
okay, I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? And so that
Yeah,
to make this point. Um, do you go to your temple, your local temple regularly?
regular in the sense, yeah, I try and go like once a month, or at least
Good,
like
great.
once bi-weekly, yeah, not
Okay,
regularly, I guess.
that's great. How many non-Hindus do you see at the temple?
Very few,
Okay. Very few. Do
very
they
few.
have,
Like
does the
I
temple that
couldn't
you
even,
go to,
yeah,
do they have an after-school program for community at large?
not that I know of, no.
All right. All right. So
I
now,
will say it could be due to the fact that it's in Manhattan, I guess, but like in other parts, yeah, even one back home, I've not seen that, no.
yeah, and the answer is no. So let me give you an example because I so many of my Hindu friends and when we all get together, they always say, "Couple, we want to be like the Jewish community with that kind of influence. Take our individual success, translate it to that." So I tell them, "Well, did you know that the Jewish diaspora has built over 140 hospitals around the United States?" How many Hindu or Indian American hospitals have been built around the United States? The answer is zero. Yeah, have you heard of the Jewish community centers, JCAs, and stuff like that? There are 1,400 affiliate, 400, sorry, 400 Jewish American community centers around the country. 400. How many Indian American or Hindu community centers that are open to the public have been built? I don't think many. And so the and they're all funded by very successful people, right? We building these beautiful temples all around the country, beautiful temples, which are like our beacons for our community to go and to congregate and to show fellowship, right? But it's not open to the community at large. And so that's why it's not translating into civic success because we don't give a vibe in today's local t language. We're not giving a positive vibe to people outside of our diaspora. And what that's doing is that it's creating resentment. It's creating a new boogeyman. It is, um, it is causing a lot of angst. I'm going to throw a non-Hindu related issue, but H-1Bs. And all of a sudden now, H-1Bs are being blamed for job loss in the United States. And that's because for the last 15 to 20 years, we just simply have not done a good job in engaging the broader community. Um, and and even in our political leadership, you see what's going on to Sri Dhanadhar and Raja Krishnamurti, two very proud Hindus and two people who talk about their Hindu faith a lot. And the attacks, even Vivek Ramaswamy, who talks about his Hindu faith a lot, the attacks that they get, does our community rally around them to say you can't beat them on issues, but don't attack them on their faith because we don't attack other communities on their faith. Why is it okay to attack Hindu faith from our elected officials? We do nothing. And in fact, Indian Americans are leading the attack against Sri Thanadar. So we're not even unified. We don't even say we should leave our Indian American congressman in Detroit alone and allow him to continue to serve. But we don't it's other Indian Americans are leading the charge to unseat a Hindu American sitting in Detroit. So that's the problem. We give mixed messages. We're not unified, and we do a very poor job of reaching outward. We're too inward focused.
Going back to that point you made about temples, I guess how can temples and cultural organizations engage civic participation without becoming maybe like recognized as like a partisan political space or such?
It doesn't have to be partisan. Just engage the community. Engage the community regularly. I know that always you'll invite the mayor or the congressman or the governor at the opening of a temple. And then you only invite them when it's Diwali, or you only invite them when it's a religious ceremony. Um, I believe that you should be inviting them once a month, every month to meet the local people. I think what they should do is they should see and meet Hindu Americans and they should say, you know what, they're just like us. Hindu Americans are here who want to earn a good living. They want to raise a family. They want their kids to go to good schools. And they'll be like, wow, they're no different than us. So when you do it around holidays or festivals, it doesn't really, in my opinion, give a true insight as to who are the people that go to the temple. So when I go to a temple on a random weekday night, it's just normal people in there. And I will tell you, that will really change the way people perceive us. And that it's not, everyone dressed up and everyone is, in a good mood, obviously, during festivals, but it's a festival. So I think we need to do a better job of reaching out all the time versus just part of the time.
And I guess about like the reaching out, I notice a lot of people do follow like, national politics but know very little about local governments. I guess firstly, like why should young professionals pay more attention to their local civic life, or why is that important for people to do this and not just be concerned? Because a lot of people's definition of politics is what's going on a scale that's very large, usually on the national government level, but very few know what's going around in a community that they might be interacting with day to day. How can they get more engaged, and why is it important that they do?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to mince words here. Our community is gets caught up in optics. We love saying I'm the first of this, I'm the first of that, and they love going around to all these big communities and saying, I should be elected for this, or we want to take the photo op. We're a photo op community as well. It was like that in the early 90s, and it's continues to be like that today. But what we forget is when a temple is built, um, who approves the plans for the temple? Let me ask you, Shrikar. Who approves who approves the design of a temple in a local in a wherever they're building it?
I'm guessing it has to be the local government. I mean, every county has a board or like a local township, maybe that would have to approve it. Because
Right.
even, at least from what I understood, like building plans are approved by it.
Well, there you go. And who can actually reject the approval of the plans?
Yep, that same
The
county,
same county.
that board.
Who actually will have to approve the traffic patterns of every temple that you build?
Same,
Same.
that local
There
county.
you go. And then who decides how much you're going to pay in property tax?
Yep,
Yeah.
that
I
same
mean,
local county.
Kumar Barve, who was the first Indian American elected from Maryland in 1991, I became friends with him, and he was just telling me about everything that he does, and I'm like, my Lord, you are so involved in my day-to-day life, like and I think that came out during COVID. I think there's COVID really just started to show to people how much does the local government impact your day-to-day life. School boards. Who knew school boards were that important? I didn't. I mean, I just thought it was just where all the weird people ran for office and then they got stuck on the school board. But man, they had a lot of power and they impact your day-to-day life. When I was talking about Richmond, and there was some problems going on and some vandalism going on to the local temples there. Who responds? Is it the congressman that responds? Or is it the local police chief that responds? Is it the local city councilman that's supposed to respond? So, you know, the reality is that your day-to-day life is impacted more by local politicians. And I would tell everybody that's listening and every one of your members, go out in the next 2 weeks and seek an appointment with your councilman and with your state legislator and with your lower house or upper house, whatever they call in each state, and just go and say hi. You won't believe the impact that will have. It will have tremendous impact. So in where I live in Virginia, we're the only district or the only area in the whole country that has an Indian American congressman. By the way, Suhas is also a very proud Hindu. He's Suhas Subramaniam is the congressman. Srinivasan is the state legislator. JJ Singh is the local delegate. The only one, all three. And I can tell you, they are really powerful. The funny thing is their big issue is data centers. And so you have three Indian Americans leading the policy discussion on data centers. But it's not Suhas, it's Srinivasan and Singh that are actually your local elected officials who are doing the most work on data centers. So it's so important. It's so, so important that I prefer to work more with local officials than I do with national officials.
That's super interesting, and I really like that point about that civic habit, I guess, that every American should practice, and the emphasis on local. Just in about 5 minutes, we'll start. In a few
Sure.
minutes, I guess we'll start getting questions from the audience. But
Sure.
we
I
just,
want to
sorry.
I want to make one more local point too. And think about this, where if your organization wants to make a huge, huge, huge difference, think about how many votes a state delegate or a local delegate or a mayor needs to win. So if you're in a school campus and let's say there's 100 members within the Hindu chapter there, and let's assume all of you can vote, all of them can vote. If you're running an election and you have, let's say, you need 12,000 votes to win, that 100 votes becomes really, really, really important because a lot
Yeah,
of local elections are won by 50 votes, 60 votes, 70 votes. So um, you have a bigger and larger impact. There's also um, 33 Indian Americans that are in state legislators around the country. We only have six, soon to be four, in the U.S. Congress. There's just more seats, there's more opportunity, and it's just much easier to engage. So your influence and impact is far greater at the local level than it is at the national level.
yeah, and yeah, and that definitely makes sense as like if there's more people on a national level versus obviously much less in a county, each of the individual votes has a much bigger impact than it would on a scale where there's many more people voting. Just quickly for a quick lightning round, just with one or two questions before we start taking questions from the audience. What is, in your opinion, one quality every effective leader or advocate needs? Like, what's the most important quality? And I
Patience,
know there's probably a lot, but
patience.
patience.
Um, you need to be patient. You need to listen to people. You need to be patient and let people express their views. You need to be patient and fully take your time to understand an issue. If you meet anybody who runs for office and they do more talking than listening, skip that person. Go to the next one because that person will not be patient to hear you out when you need them to.
Yeah. And what is one issue young Hindu Americans should learn more about?
Issue. Honestly, I think that every young Hindu American should understand there's civil rights at the state level. I mean, it's really, really important. Um, there's so many times in which we're attacked, where something happens or hurts us or hurts our community, and we don't know the laws that protect us. And I think that
Yeah,
we tend to forget that there are more laws protecting us than we realize, and that you can use the law to effectuate change. And so that's what I would say. Get together and just understand your rights realistically, not like what you see on TikTok and IG where the guy's walking around with a camera and he's like, I have a right to be here in the public square, blah, blah, blah. Blah. God, I laugh. Actually, whenever I feel sad, I watch those videos because it does make me feel better. Because at least I know there's a lot of dummies out there, and then I can still be on top of where I am because there's so many dumb people that follow that. But that was the one thing when I went to law school that it taught me more than anything else was that how many rights I have and that I can use the law to really protect me versus actually being angry and getting into fights with people.
Kapil ji, that was super, very insightful. Um, we now will start taking questions from the audience. So, the first question we have is, what's a mistake you've seen well-intentioned Hindu American advocacy groups make when trying to engage in civic life?
I mean, that's a great question. Um, a mistake. I think the mistake again is I'm going to go back to um, this fear of I don't I think it's the mistake they okay, it's not a fear. I would say it's the proportion of being outward versus inward. So right now, I think in this juncture of where we are in this country and the politics, we need to spend more of our time educating people outside of our community than within our community. And so I think that's a mistake that we make. Imagine this. Okay, so there has to be some Hindus that are living in Montana, correct? Now imagine if and they probably don't engage their local officials or their governor or their senators often. I'm going to assume that. Could be wrong, but I'm just making that assumption. If they spent more time engaging the local politicians there, then those politicians would hopefully have a more favorable or more understanding and realistic view of what it is to be a Hindu than to base it off of Nancy Mace and some of these racist idiots that are running around in MAGA, right? Who want to portray us as one way. So I would say the mistake is that we don't emphasize engagement outside of our community, and we need to continue to do it more. And then the other thing is we don't engage law enforcement as well. And I think we need to engage law enforcement even more so than ever before.
The next question is, if you could tell your college age self one thing about what national service would actually look like, what would it be?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question too. These are college kids that are submitting these questions.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I think we have to have a better North Star as a group. I think for Hindu Americans, it's a little bit easier than it is to be Indian American. Um, I don't, because as a Hindu American, you have a common definition of what binds you, right? What is it? Why are we all together? Why are you all part of the same organization or same clubs? Is because you identify and you practice as a Hindu. But if you're Indian American, what does being Indian American mean? And I think that that is the struggle that we're having in this country. And what I fear is that, and this has been said to me by a few people, that Hindu Americans are going to branch off and do their own thing, and they're not going to identify as much as Indian Americans anymore, which scares me a little bit because I think that that could create a lot of chaos on a civic and political front. Because what we'll do is we'll weaken ourselves as a community. Um, So what one of the first things I would have done at a college age is I would have worked on better definitions of who we are as a diaspora. I would have I got attacked a lot for rejecting hyphenation. So I don't call myself Indian American. I just call myself American. And the reason why I do that is that when I look at myself as an American, I view myself as an American, right? Hindu, Punjabi, blah blah blah. Go down my whole characteristics. I want a Christian white male to look at me as an American as well. And to see that just because my faith is different than his, or just because my skin color is different than his, we're still both Americans. The minute we go into this hyphenation, we are automatically pointing out our differences. And when you point out your differences, it becomes harder to kind of see yourself as a collective unit. And that's what I fear might happen with Hindu Americans and Indian Americans. Is that it is really hard right now to figure out what does it mean to be Indian American. It's easier to identify as Hindu American. But is that good for the overall diaspora? And I would tell you no. So I would have done that better in college. I would have tried to figure out how do we unify ourselves from an identity perspective better.
Yeah, that's even earlier you touched on a point about unity, and I think the next question actually transitions on that again. With Hindus spread across many organizations with different goals, what steps can we take to bridge that gap that appears when trying to understand our duty towards this country?
We got to talk. I mean, that's the key. And we have to also accept the fact that we're not always going to agree, even between as Hindus. We may not agree. But we need to talk and we need to understand. And so I'm a big believer of talking with a purpose. And so finding one or two or three issues that are really, really important to us as a collective group, and then just keeping those as your North Star, and you keep working towards that. Differences will come, fights will happen. I mean, we're Indian, that's going to happen, right? Argumentative Indian. But as long as we are going in that right direction, so collectively say this is where we want to be, then that's a good thing. But you can only do that if you talk and you listen and not talk at someone, but talk with someone.
I think you touched on this last question earlier, but just to come back to it, is there a generational gap in how first generation immigrants versus their children think about civic duty, and
One
how should the
million
community
percent.
bridge it?
1 million%. Um, that is the hardest question to answer. It is something I don't know if you can answer it. Like, I remember before I said that I'm going to use this chain interchangeably, right? Okay, Indian American and Hindu American for our conversation. Um, the experience someone's going to have in Boston is going to be very different than the experience someone's going to have in Frisco. And the first generation person, as we talked about before, came to this country for a different reason than me. I had no choice. I'm here. My parents had a choice. You know, I'm glad they made the choice, but they had a choice. So your whole purpose and your whole identity and your whole goal and objectives in life are just going to be different because the reason you're here is very different. We just have to accept that. Once you accept that, now the question to ask is, what is the kind of country that I want to live in? That's where you can find that area of commonality. So let's get beyond why we're here. Let's start focusing on what we want this place to be. And do we want it to be this place where we can be a proud Hindu and walk and I can call anybody, let's say Robert G, whatever. I can I can be fully express myself as a Hindu and not feel
Yeah.
embarrassed or attacked or feel that there are repercussions for it. And there are steps and there are
Yeah.
ways for us to get to that point. I think we can all agree that's the kind of country we want to be. And that gets past the whole generational point. But yes, there is a huge generational problem. Um, I think the lack of also national or cultural identity and the strength of that cultural identity um, has also led to major political divisions within our community as well. Major we
Yeah.
there's a reason why our community is neglected by politicians. And if we don't fix this now, and we're 5 million strong now, and we can't, it'll be impossible to fix when we double that number. So it's incumbent on all of you as young people to fix this identity issue now before the community gets too large, and then you won't be able to do it.
One final question just regarding identity and also a broader theme of this series. America recently had its 250th anniversary. What does it mean to you to be both proudly Hindu and American?
Okay, so you know how everybody thinks we're all H-1Bs, right? That we just recently came over to do tech work. Even you, even though you're a finance guy working at Goldman, congrats on that. Pretty cool. But I'm sure I'm going to sound so bad by saying, oh, they probably think tech guy is here, but not at Goldman. There's too many of you finance guys running around. But let's say just walking any corporate building. When was the first Hindu place of worship started in the United States? Do you know?
If I had to, no, not off the top of my head, maybe
Ah, ah,
1920s maybe.
before that, before that, before that. You know, Punjabis helped build the railroads in California,
Yeah, yeah,
and
absolutely.
Swami Vivekananda made a
Yeah, gave the
tour
speech
of
at
the
the
United
World
States.
Hindu
Yeah,
Conference.
so I think the first official Hindu place of worship was in San Francisco in the late 1800s. Um, and so I think that what the first thing we need to do, and what all of us need to do, is we need to educate ourselves about this amazing U.S. India history. So, can I take 1 minute to kind of give you a quick historical run? Just because I
Yeah,
don't think many
sure.
people know it. Did you know that George Washington's second consulate he authorized was in India? And that the United States and India had a robust trade before both lands were made into countries and governments. That have you heard of Tata Steel
Yeah, I've heard.
and the symbolism behind Tata Steel? Do you know that Tata Steel's father, I mean the guru and the real father obviously is Jamshedji Tata, but it was built by a white guy from Pittsburgh. And so the connect of Pittsburgh to India's development goes back to the 1800s. That the first Asian American congressman was Dalip Singh Sahn from Amritsar, who this is the 70th year of his election. That Indians were fighting for the United States in World War One and World War Two, and that Indians helped build the Northern California economy. So the first thing that I would say is that in the 250th anniversary of the United States, I try to remind every American that India and the United States have been friends far longer before there was even the governments, and that our connection goes way back. That we are not recent immigrants, that we've been immigrants here for over 150 years. Then I would start talking about the connection between the United States and Hinduism spans that long, and
Yeah,
that Hindus have been living in this country peacefully for a very long time. And guess what?
yeah,
We have been builders of this economy. We have fought for this country. We have built jobs for this country. We are very much invested in the economic and the political and social growth of this country. And I want to remind people that every day. And that way they can realize we're not recent immigrants. We are far more American than a lot of other immigrant groups. And there should be some respect to that journey and our experience here. We got to last point. We have to own our story too. It's incumbent on all of you all of you, to own your story. Own our diaspora story, own the Hindu story. Do not leave it to others to tell our story. We must tell it ourselves. So come to a common storytelling, get together, say, okay, when we go out to meet some congressman or some senator or some local official, we all have to tell the same story because we all have to own it. Don't leave it up to others to tell our story. We must tell our own. That's what I would leave you with.
Yeah, thank you so much for that last 1 minute. Also, that was very, I think it'll be helpful for a lot of the viewers too. And it's had a lot of things that was new to many people. But thank you, Kapilji, for sharing your insights and experiences with us. We hope tonight's conversation inspires all of us to reflect on our responsibilities, both as young Americans and how we can better serve our communities. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us. I'll now turn it over to Brad.
Thank you so much, Shrikar and Kapilji, for such a thoughtful and grounded conversation tonight. Honestly, conversations like this remind me just how much talent and passion exists in the next generation of Hindu Americans. There's so many bright, driven young people watching tonight who are going to carry all of this work forward. And hearing you speak about, national dharma and your experience and your perspective, it gives us a real framework to build off of. But I think what's clear is that this is really just the beginning. There's so much more work to do and so much more conversation to be had. And tonight was just the tip of the iceberg. So we're so grateful you gave us a piece of your time and a piece of your wisdom to help kick that off. And to echo what Shrikar said, thank you to everyone who joined us live tonight. Thank you for being here and for being a part of this conversation. Today was the third of our four-part Dharma in America series, and we have one final Sunday to go with another very, very special guest. So we do hope you'll join us at 8 p.m. Eastern for a final session as we close out the series. So again, on behalf of Hindu Yuva, thank you to our speaker Kapilji, to our moderator Shrikar, and to all of you watching. Namaste, and we'll see you next Sunday.